Hey everybody, welcome to the FreeMind Podcast. This is episode 45. All right, if you are just jumping in on your first or you just haven't been paying attention, this is not your average podcast. There are no scripts, there are no prep meetings, and there are no agendas. This is genuine, unfiltered conversations captured on camera, making it one of the realest things on the internet. Today we're diving into the art of storytelling with the master himself, Blake Hudson. Get ready to learn how to captivate and persuade, whether you're in the boardroom or the job interview. Let's check out Blake's story.
Hey there, my name is Blake Hudson. I'm a sales enablement professional. I've been working in the tech sales space for about going on 6 years now, and really pleased to be doing the work I do. I help new account executives, new SDRs get onboarded and hit the ground running.
Excellent. Talk to me a little bit about story selling, the interview course that you worked on.
Yeah, story selling is a huge passion project of mine. I've been in hundreds, if not 1,000 interview settings, both as an interviewer, as a candidate, observer. And it dawned on me that people kept asking me questions about best interview practices. And I felt like I was having the same conversation over and over. And so for me, it was twofold, in terms of the goals. One was to be more efficient in how I was answering that question instead of, answering it 10, 20 times over. The second was wanting to be able to impart very practical knowledge for people going through interviews. Just as an example, a couple of years ago, I was a hiring manager for an SDR team, and I interviewed between 275 and 300 candidates. So I got a feel for like what candidates were doing that worked, what they weren't doing. You could tell some who had prepared. And so the course was designed to give people a framework to go and share their story in a more compelling way, in a more persuasive way.
I think that's this is a common theme that comes up in this podcast is sometimes even the most tenured salespeople and marketing people sometimes have trouble telling the simplest story, and whether that being like, we're really good at the ad campaigns and all that stuff, but it's like to get to the real genuine raw story, we sometimes put too much complication on all the presentation, the pomp and circumstance, and really just get down to what drives this business and turns the lights on philosophically every day.
That's it. And your customers, especially, they're telling a story as well, whether they know it or not. And we as sellers have an opportunity to help them tell a better story if we understand the fundamentals of storytelling.
Absolutely. And you've had a really impressive track record that I looked at on LinkedIn there. And talk about kind of let's call it like a 3-step career pathing when you went from SDR to senior BDR. Can you kind of share some of your strategies and philosophies and how you were moving through that success?
Yeah, well, you might have seen here, I've got a few different career paths I've been in since graduating from college, which feels like a long time ago. I log into LinkedIn now, I see when people are graduating college these days, and I'm like, dang, I'm closer to 20-year high school reunions than I am graduation. That's wild. I started my career in politics. I was really focused on that and serving people in public service. Then I transitioned into academia, where I was consulting with community colleges, helping with recruitment, retention as an admissions counselor. And then those two experiences informed me that I was in sales, but I just wasn't getting trained like a seller. And more importantly, I wasn't getting paid like a seller. And I wanted the opportunity to develop that skill set. And so I came into sales with a unique perspective on what it meant to really understand your customer, to lean into their story and to help them solve the problem that they may or may not know they have yet. That's kind of been the common line throughout what I've done in my career, whether I myself is doing it as an individual contributor or helping other sales reps possess those skills themselves.
Talk to me about maybe like a situation, either bad or good, where you felt like your work with someone else really made an impact, and you saw the results. And it didn't have to be monetary. You just saw the results and the progress.
I had a young man who we first met when I was working at a tech sales boot camp where we would train individuals and get them prepared to head into the tech sales community. And I met this individual. He was from a coal mining town, and he himself had been in the mines, right, working below ground and getting it done. And he was interested in a new career path. He had done some door-to-door sales, but wanted this more professional approach to it. Tech sales, inside sales. And when I first met him, I could just tell his energy was infectious. Like he was the type of person that like makes you come alive because of how much energy he brings. And I told him, I was like, hey, if you got time, let's meet tomorrow. It's a Saturday morning. Like, let's see on a Saturday morning. We'll work on your LinkedIn. We'll work on your resume. To his credit, he showed up. He continued to put the work in. And after going through our program, he ended up getting a job as a tech sales professional. That's not where the story gets good, though. Where the story gets good is a year after that. I then am in a position to hiring and building a sales team, an SDR team. I had to take it from 5 to 15. And one of the first hires I made was this individual. And from the moment we met, I was always trying to hold up a mirror and show him who he was. And I just was like, you have a gift that you might not know you see it. You don't see it yet. And so for me, it was helping him understand who he was so that he could do his job to the best of his ability. A lot of times people don't need much more than just a reminder of who they are. And that I was really taken aback at how sharing with someone who they are, what their gift is, can invite them to be more of themselves and obviously support and succeed because of that.
We've spent so much time as a culture aspiring, and we've spent so much time, whether it was the magazine covers or whatever advertising we were putting out there, and I'm just as much as one that was designing the ads that did this, so I'm just as guilty as one putting it out there. But looking back and kind of retrospectively looking back, it's interesting and it's exciting to be in this place where, as a society, it seems like we're going to the we are enough. And we don't need, not that we need to be stagnant. I'm not promoting stagnant, but I'm promoting progress, but I'm also promoting pause for a second and just realize that like we've been through a lot, and also we are enough. You're doing great. Or if you're not doing great, sit down and really think about, instead of pointing fingers and blaming at everybody else, what's wrong with this situation? Is there something you can change right now and tweak something to make your situation differently? And whether that be financially or just perspective wise, you know what I mean? Just taking a different lens, I think, is something that is really important these days.
I'm curious. You mentioned you've hit on some really important tones, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on how the pandemic shifted our views on identity. Like, 'cause something happened there, and I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
My thoughts, and this is not by any scientific background, this is just strictly anecdotally, and especially after I've been with these episodes having a lot of recordings per day with the various people from around the country and the world. And a lot of it is a lot of common themes like you're talking about right now, which is it's a lot of people realizing the self-identity and self-inventory that's going on. And I think that my personal opinion is, it goes back to the water cooler days. You know what I mean? When you're in the cubicle, you were at the water cooler and you were talking about what happened last night or anything like that. But organically, there was different checks and balances with your life, that whether that was the checks and balances that made you kind of self-aware, or it was checks and balances that made you guide through your life and not pay attention to anything. We all got in this routine and this momentum, and we just fell into our clicks and our motions and our activities. And I think when all that stopped, you had mentioned, I think, about the mirror and stuff like that. And I think that's the number one thing is like, I feel like we slowed down and we were forced to stand in front of the mirror longer than usual because we weren't rushing out to go somewhere. And I think that we've all, whether we want to admit it or not, whether it be through professional therapy or just through self-reflection, I think that we've all had a pivotal moment in our lives. And that could be two ways. One would be the self-reflection where somebody's using that as a priority and a pivot to move forward. And the other where people just want to put their head in the sand and pretend like nothing happened. That's the two paths I think that are there. And I think right now, not to pontificate too much, but I mean, right now, I think we're trying to figure out what that means.
Yeah.
Like what is that self-reflection mean? Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? And then how do we're not the same. Like nobody can say you're the same after that. I mean, whether you're a business owner or not, especially, and everybody had different scenarios, whether they're business owners or whether they're employees or whether they were healthcare workers or whether they were, grocery store workers or whether they were construction workers or whoever. Let's anything. Everybody had a unique experience. And I don't know any other times other than from my life, thinking back to like 9/11, where we uniformly had a traumatic experience simultaneously as a society.
Yeah. You could the recession, housing bubble, '08, but like even that, it wasn't as felt as the pandemic was. Like we
Yeah,
weren't.
I graduated college in '08. I was one of the ones that like couldn't find a job at first, but it didn't feel like this at all.
No.
This was really reflective, because even after 9/11, I was in junior, senior in high school, and it was that patriotic, everybody was together, but that was blinding in a sense. It wasn't really the self-reflective individual thing that happened during COVID. And I think I like where you're going with that. And I don't, it's only in the past like week or two that I've really kind of been taking a lot of through these conversations with people and taking a reflection on what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm really surprised to find how many people went through that. A lot of us joked around online about, what we were watching or what we were doing, but I think there was a lot more going on than we thought. A lot more people taking inventory.
Right. Agreed.
I think with that part there, that you're talk a little bit about your rework.
Rework was a time where I was able to do enablement work intentionally for the first time. And
it's the book, right? We're talking about the same.
Rework definitely is a book. I worked at a company called Rework Training, which was a tech sales boot camp, particularly for underrepresented groups in Chicago.
Awesome.
And so,
expand on that. No, that's cool. Yeah.
It was very fulfilling. When I got into tech sales, I didn't see anybody that looked like me. I didn't see anybody that had my background and my experiences and my upbringing. And I was able to navigate my way through that just from previous experiences in my life and my professional career. Not everybody has that. And so for me to be able to be an example for some other folks, for me to be able to be support for them, to give them the skills that they need, the empowerment that they needed to step into this new career, it was just very rewarding. But yeah, overcoming that initial hurdle of like, is this world for me? Do I have a space in it? How do I even step my foot in get my foot in the door? But what do I do when I'm in the room? Right. And so those were the sorts of problems we were helping our candidates solve and making that transition into a new career.
How do you what are some of the situations, and this doesn't have to be with names or brands or anything like that, but anything that you've seen in types of, this doesn't need to be a gossipy thing, just like, what are some of the things if somebody like myself might not understand what you mean by that? Like somebody that might say, like, I'm not speaking for myself, I'm being devil's advocate for this, but if I was somebody who was like, I don't understand how changing an industry has any reflection on what the cultural things or anything you're talking about, kind of speak to how there's some differences there. And I think it's important to understand that it is becoming a grayer. It is becoming grayer, it seems like sometimes. So,
well, one thing, just off the top is certain upbringings, like if you were in poverty or if you were a lower income individual, there's a little bit of like social, financial insecurity that can happen if, no one in your family has made more than like $40,000 a year. So someone starts waving there's an entry level role where you can make 50 grand or 80 grand or 100, depending on how you perform. Like that's very foreign to people. And it can feel like, what makes me think I could go do that? What am I basing that off of? And I would come along and say, hey, you've been preparing for this your whole life. You don't understand what sales truly is. Sales is about connecting to people. It's about being empathetic. It's about problem solving. And then you start to realize, oh yeah, I do all of that. I have been preparing for this. So there's that first little vulnerability and security. The second thing is being able to see where that skill set fits. So once you're told like, hey, you belong, hey, you already have a skill set, this is how you use it in this career path. And so being able to share with them like, hey, sales is a very human thing. It's a very natural thing. But let me tell you about how you apply those skills to serve people in this work. So those three things in particular, I think we kind of take for granted, like where a person's coming from, where a person is, where they aspire to be, and understanding that all three of those things might need to be reconsidered. Going back to our previous conversation about looking in the mirror, sometimes you got to look in the mirror. Sometimes you need someone to like tell you what's in the mirror as well. Show you some things about yourself that you didn't quite know were there.
Yeah, that's definitely something that gets not enough credit in people's lives. Is a lot of times focus, whether it's the media or newspapers or whatever, is focusing on one specific person, but not realizing that there's always people behind that person that are pushing that person. Because, you could be the buffest dude in the gym, but guaranteed at 4 a.m. he's complaining on his way to the gym too. You know what I mean? Somebody,
Not all fun.
whether somebody's in his ear or somebody pushed him out the door, or everybody has those days, and we just got to stick to it. And I appreciate the way you put that. And I think the piece that I really like about the way that you approach the training is something I think that inhibits a lot of people from realizing. The reason I asked that question about what would inhibit somebody from shifting in industries is I think a lot of people stay in an industry longer than they might want to sometimes, because they're like, oh, I'm just a salesman for food, or I'm just a salesman for tech, or I'm just a salesman for software, or mechanical and tools and equipment. And I think that what you said is really striking, though. It's like making people understand. I've had this personally in my own life where I turned down things because I didn't think that I could do it. And then looking back, it's like I could have, because it is a universal trait. And it took some major decisions and instances in life to realize that I'm very much a hold my hand on the stove for as long as possible to realize it's hot kind of person. So
Yeah.
With that said, I want to talk a little bit about, your work is constantly looking at building and maintaining strong cultures and teams. At Tapcart, I saw you had 100% retention rate on the community building efforts with the SDRs. Talk about that work and how you get, whether it's 100% or 75%, you know what I mean? The fact is, retention is a very big thing right now. And what were you doing that maybe made people want to stick around from a top level, generally speaking thing?
Yeah. Well, I'll keep it, as clear as I can. I tried to create an environment of motivation. So that requires three things. The first is autonomy. So you would think in an SDR role, you got to have a heavy fist. Like, these are the numbers, these are the metrics, get there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you give someone the space, right? When you say, hey, this is where we need to go. Let's talk about how you get there. You tell me, what do you think? Hey, these are the emails we got to send out. What would you change about them? If you were receiving this, what would really make it stand out? So giving them that sense of autonomy. The second thing is mastery. So helping them understand not just if they're getting better, but how. Charting trajectory, understanding where you were, where you're headed. So the mastery part was really important. We don't consider that enough with SDRs, particularly, of like, the job can become very binary, like make calls, send email, make calls, send email. There's more to it than that. There's more nuance to it than that. And when we as leaders give people that sense of mastery, that sense of craft, the development, I think they take the role a little bit more seriously. And the last thing is purpose. This is a big one that I think a lot of leaders miss out. From the first interview, I was always asking them, what do you want? What do you want? And I'm not talking about like just out of your career. It's like, you want to get promoted. Yes, you want that, but why? What's the deeper why? What's the why behind the why? And when I would hear things like, I want to get my parents a different home, I want to take my fiance on a trip, like, there are these different things that people were deeply motivated by. And when it came time to do the work, I wasn't holding people accountable to a number like quota. It's arbitrary. It can change from month to month. And it's a little bit independent, it lives outside of us. But that thing that you told me that you really want, that's the sort of purpose-driven work that we're going to do here. And so we were always in alignment on those things. I tried to create an environment where they were growing despite whether they got promoted or not. So they were getting better every day. And I think that we had a culture of that. So one person would come in, buy into that. The next person comes in, they're watching this person grow. And then it becomes part of that second person's culture. They start to take ownership, and so on and so forth, where you have a group of people who feel a sense of ownership over the culture that they're working in.
I think it's interesting. Like, I haven't talked about this with many people, but I think you're the right person to talk to about this with. Do you find it as fascinating as I do, as we're coming to this realization of more authenticity and more genuineness? And I was not always like this. It's a product of what happened during COVID, and it hit me to a self-reflection point, and it pivoted my entire lens of my entire life. And so when you brought that up, it was striking to me, because I think that was exactly the way I feel. With that said, with this rise in authenticity and people being genuine and being authentic to and true to themselves and true to other people. Do you find it fascinating that we're having a rise of that at the same time we're having a rise of AI? And I think like it's almost like a battle to like balance normalcy. You know what I mean? Like if we're going to such an extreme in tech, it's almost like we're holding on to, which I'm an advocate of. I have ChatGPT in my life and stuff like that, but I also, I'm an advocate of the balance of it. And I think it's interesting that we're going what seems like a big movement of self-awareness at the same time of a movement or revolution or evolution, whatever, of AI.
Well, for me, the authenticity and the vulnerability stems from my time in politics, where at 24, I was a candidate for state senate. So here I was knocking on doors, asking for votes, doing fundraising, and I recognized that I was living my life in a fishbowl. But in a way, we all kind of living these lives. We're showing up every day in public. We have this persona, we have a personal brand, whether we know it or not, whether we're intentional about it or not. And so being in such a pressure cooker environment where I knew eyes were on me, it helped me realize the importance and the pervasiveness of vulnerability and authenticity. And some people, they lean into that. Some people avoid it, but it's there for you. It's there for the taking. There's a void there that you need to fill or you can run away from. Going back to your second point, though, about AI, I see some people say like the lines between human and automation are blurring. I kind of disagree. I think that something like ChatGPT actually, it enhances the level of humanity because it's a tool. Like that's as if we said fire is going to put people out of jobs. Right? this wheel thing that we invented, it's going to put people out of jobs. It's like, okay, it could, but it could also be a part of.
The guy who used to carry the wagon was
Ford Motor Company as well, and it gives the people a bunch of jobs. So how we utilize tools is as human of a thing as it comes. And I don't think that this tool is going to replace us any more than fire or the wheel or any other piece of technology that we found.
No, it's I was at a conversation with Joshua Kagan from Bonfire Capital out in California. With AI and it being a tool, it's effectively the way you had said that too. And even Clifford Starks was talking about this the other day with it being a tool. And as long as it stays as a tool, we can then allow it to take care of those administrative things and allow our brains to work at another level of capacity for creativity and strategy with not having to spend the time every day doing all the mundane tasks that we're able to make ChatGPT do for us when used in the right proper fashion.
Correct. 100% agree there. And I'm glad we're on the same page about it being a tool that we use rather than this thing that's going to take us over.
Well, I have that fear as well in the back of my mind, but on the front of my mind, it's going to stick to being a calculator.
I like that. Yeah, a calculator.
It's a calculator. Yeah, it's a really fancy calculator. I want to go back too with your storytelling. Storytelling is, and not story selling, excuse me, and story selling being central to like the approach of a lot of the training you do. Your course and different parts in your career. Elaborate a little bit on the importance of storytelling in sales and in leadership. I understand marketing is important in ad campaigns and quotas, but the story selling, talk about how important that is with conversions and lead generation.
Yeah. So I'll give kind of the framework for story selling, and then we can apply that in, the new context that we were just talking about with sales. But essentially, the first thing I try and do is help people understand what a story is. And essentially, it's a character who navigates some sort of conflict to undergo a transformation, right? You kind of have that element present in almost every story. A lot of times we as sellers tend to run away from conflict. We think, oh no, if we agree with the customer, it'll blow the deal up. Not necessarily. Sometimes that conflict, it pulls things out in the deal that you needed to identify as early as possible. That's the first thing. The second thing is what makes a story persuasive. So I'm helping interview candidates utilize things like Aristotle's rhetorical appeals, right? Ethos, pathos, logos. How do you appeal to someone, not just from a place of credibility, not even just from a place of like logic, but also emotion, right? How do you appeal to someone on those deeper levels? Then I had them look inward and start to think through what is your story? What are these different moments in your life, these vignettes where you can look at a situation and say, this is how I changed. This is how I grew. This is what I learned from that scenario. And you put those things together and you start to navigate this not only a cohesive story, but a narrative, that you become a more narrative driven individual. In sales, it's very similar. We start to understand these building blocks of, hey, tell me about why you created this business. How did you end up in this scenario? Good discovery is story building. So you're understanding a better picture of where that customer is in. From there, a lot of communication tactics. So a skill like bridging, for instance, you start to answer one question, and to get your message across, you bridge that answer into another point. It seems simple when you describe it, but it takes practice, and it's a very nuanced thing. So with a customer, they ask you something, you answer it, but then you take that and pivot in a different direction. That's a skill. It's sometimes necessary so you don't get stuck on certain patterns of thought or certain parts of the deal cycle. And then the last thing for the course was helping them build a cheat sheet. This document that's got, brief notes on what are my strengths? What's my tell me about yourself? What are my hobbies? Because we forget, like sometimes they ask us, tell me about you as a person. And we're like, oh, shoot, I forgot to research me. So having that cheat sheet in the interview process is great. Having battle cards in a sales process is great. As an enablement professional, I'm building a lot of those battle cards. So helping your sales rep understand their product better, understand their customer better, and the context that their customer is living in. So that's story selling in a nutshell. That's how to apply it for an interview. That's how to apply it in a sales process. But the best way I can put a bow on that is just really dig deep into your customer story. Don't stay at the surface. The deeper you can go, the more information you have. And ultimately, I believe customers have the answers to the test. We have to ask the right questions. Questions are our seller's most powerful tool. So asking good questions is essential to good storytelling.
It's powerful. The discovery is admittedly a recent thing for me to the extent of quality that I'm doing now. And it was mainly in my life prior was in the alcohol space, which with the franchise laws, when you work with a distributor or something else, they can only buy a product from one person. So you don't really have to do a whole lot of discovery. It's more or less like this is where it is, and this is what I want, and this is what you're doing product sales. Now I do a lot more different stuff in the sales space and I'm more in the tech space. And it's amazing how the different types of sales in that space are discovery focused. And it's been a great learning curve, and it's exciting. And it's actually made this podcast more exciting, probably more enjoyable for a lot of people learning, because it's been an evolution of my own learning in the past few months about the importance of discovery and the difference in that qualitative process. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you're good. No, you're good. Yep.
I was just going to say, I respect and admire it because a lot of times people think they have to have all the answers. And sometimes it's just asking the right question in the proper format, in the proper context. I myself am looking to start a show here pretty soon. And one thing I've been adamant about is that people are joining me on a journey. I'm creating a platform for people to share stories. This isn't like me coming down and telling people all the answers.
Right.
And when you do that, it really helps you build a sense of community because everybody is coming seeking that same answer. And you are just happen to be at the front, asking the questions, but you're not necessarily saying, this is the answer. I have all the answers. So it's just really encouraging to hear and a reminder of that's how true leadership looks.
It's really one of those things that I try to tell people, and this is jokingly, but it is serious. Like I'm trying to help them off the couch because I just got off the couch 5 minutes before him. It's not a big deal. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm not at the end of the marathon like holding on to my medal. I'm just off the couch, and I got a hand, and I got strength, and I can pull you off the couch. And that's really what it is.
Yeah. I'm teaching toddlers how to tie shoes.
Nice.
Expertise is relative. I might not be an expert in everything, but I know how to tie my shoes, and there's some folks out there who don't. So I'm going to help them do that.
I like that a lot. With that said, I got two more for you. Two more questions as we're talking here that just came to me. I want to tie together the teaching, coaching, and building. These are elements that, as you've been talking, I'm kind of hearing those themes go through. How do those three things continue to influence your approach to sales and your team management? So teaching, coaching, and building is got a fly flying around here inside a theme there.
Yeah. So teaching, very simply, teaching is me giving you information or helping you, get that right information. Coaching is helping you develop that information into a skill, being able to build upon and expand that topic and help you understand it from a more nuanced way, hold you accountable, practice. That's another thing that sales leaders forget about is practice. It's not enough to just do the job. You have to be able to practice the craft. And then building is doing that at scale. So how do I teach a group of sellers? How do I coach a group of sellers and keep them accountable and accountable to one another? Right. So 360 learning was something that was a big deal for me. I picked that up in academia and I brought that into the sales team. And it really helped me build a successful culture by having someone who may have only been at the company for 3 months, then mentor someone who's just coming in because they're learning things about the role by teaching others things that they already know. And so it just fostered this sense of community that built itself over time. But training, teaching, very one-to-one, coaching, very one-to-one in terms of building a skill, and building is actually doing those things at scale.
Nice. With all that and your different roles and your diverse background with your career, with the political campaign all the way through in a sales role and everything in between, what are the principles and experiences you feel like you draw back from when looking at, let's say, a new challenge or opportunity that comes through? And actually, I want you to kind of look at it both ways, the good and the bad, the challenge and the opportunities. How has your life prepared you to pivot and or prevail? There we go.
Give me a moment. I want to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
One thing that was very important for me early on was being a value add to the community that I'm in. So the neighborhood I grew up in was not always the best neighborhood. There was some crime. It was low income. Things like education and graduation rates weren't high. But my grandparents were teachers. They were educators. They served on the school board. And I had a single mom at the time, so my grandparents were really involved in that. And my grandparents and my mom helped instill in me this thought that like I had something valuable to add and I could be a part of growth instead of being a part of the same or even destruction. So having that sense of identity growing up was really important. Then I started to develop this sense of purpose in terms of helping people get clear about who they are and what they want to do. And I was able to make that happen in politics when I was inspiring constituents to say like, hey, you still have a political voice. I know that you might feel disenfranchised in some ways, economically, politically, but reminding them of who they were. And I obviously get to do that in sales now too. And then the last thing was just having a sense of passion about what you do. You could have 10 people do the same exact thing, but if one of them is extremely passionate about it, they're going to get a different outcome. They're going to have a different experience. So having that sense of who I was, having a passion for what I do and a purpose for who it's for have really helped guide me throughout my life and career.
Blake, I want to say I appreciate you taking the time today. This is not the first conversation or the last conversation. I mean, this is the first conversation, but it's not the last conversation we're going to have. I want to thank you deeply for taking the time and being open to the experience. I want to also encourage you, and we'll talk separately, to pursue that online course career and stuff like you are a born teacher, man. And I think that you have the chops and you have the charisma and you have the education and you have the experience this to put it together. And I want to, anything I can do to help you out with that, we'll have some side conversations, but I want to thank you for your time today, and I'll send you over the cut there. Anybody, how they can reach out to you and get a hold of you.
Yeah. For right now, you can just find me on LinkedIn. I joke about it, but I am building some presence on YouTube and TikTok, just trying to get a message I think that matters out to more people, a message of empowerment, a message of hope, in sales, yes, but even outside of the sales world. But yeah, people can find me those places.
Excellent, Blake. Hey, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nate. I've appreciated it too, man. I'm looking forward to those future chats where we don't press record.
Absolutely. All right. You take it easy, buddy. You enjoy your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.